Good afternoon. This is John Van Omen. This is on my channel, John's Cloud Corner. This channel is largely dedicated to automation and DevOps. I've had a lot of people asking me lately about AWS certification. I became AWS certified earlier this year. I'm an AWS certified solution architect. And after having a number of people come up to me and ask me about the certification process, instead of doing the same discussion multiple times, I thought it might be practical to create a video. So let's do that. So with AWS, there's a number of certification paths. You can find them at aws.amazon.com, training, learning paths, or you can just Google it. The certification path that I'm personally on is the architect path, and we're going to take a look at this right here. Okay, so you see that with this particular path, you start with the AWS Certified Solution Architect right there, and then you can add additional certifications as you grow more advanced in your career. But I'd say that arguably the AWS Certified Solutions Architect is the certification from AWS that's in the most demand. For instance, if you look at Google Trends, you'll see that this is the one that customers and employers are really looking for. Cloud Practitioner is another certification that is, how to put it, not as rigorous as the Solution Architect exam, but still very valuable. It basically gives you the essentials that you need to know for the, how should I say, not necessarily the architecture of solutions on AWS, but more, I almost want to say, I know this is a bit of a cliche, but it's more intended for perhaps sales. So if you are working with a customer and your customer is interested in going into AWS, the Cloud Practitioner exam is going to give you the fundamentals to be able to speak to your customer with expertise. So as I see it, the difference between the Architect exam and the Cloud Practitioner exam is that the Architect exam is really focused on, as you can imagine, what is the ideal architecture for a customer in AWS and what are the best practices, whereas the Cloud Practitioner exam is more focused on giving you the information you need to know so that you can have an educated discussion with your clients and customers in regards to AWS. So let's take a look at the developer certification. The developer certification, as the name would imply, is for people who intend to develop solutions which depend on Amazon Web Services. So to kind of give you an idea of the difference between the Solution Architect certification and the developer certification, let's take a quick look at this diagram. So this particular diagram shows the architecture of a WordPress application running on AWS. And in the picture, you can see that there's many components to it. We got NAT gateways, we have VPCs, internet gateways, we have S3 storage. So this is a diagram that an architect will need to know, need to have down cold, whereas a developer is going to be more focused on how do I communicate with the AWS APIs, what's the best way to structure my application, what what kind of debugging is involved in AWS applications. That's a big part of the developer focus. The DevOps engineer, this is an interesting one, and one of the reasons that I saved it for last is that the DevOps path actually has aspects of the developer path, but also aspects of the architect path. So, and this is something that we see with a lot of the customers that I work with, is that as time has progressed, the operations team and the engineering teams at various customers, they are not as siloed as they used. As I've shown in this video, there are many paths to AWS certification. I've covered the architect path, the cloud practitioner path, the developer path, and the DevOps engineer path. There are many, many beyond this. We see machine learning, media services, big data. There's a number of AWS certifications, and no one person will ever be able to get them all. AWS is a huge product, and of course, a big part of the certification process is figuring out what certifications are going to deliver the greatest value for you personally. I went with the solution architect certification because it most closely mirrors the work that I do on a daily basis. But again, as mentioned earlier in the video, if your role is sales, you may find that the cloud practitioner certification has more value. If you are a Java programmer or a Python programmer, or you do a lot of work with web services, the developer role can be valuable. And the DevOps role kind of straddles both. AWS is a tool specifically aimed at partners, as we see right here. And using that tool, it can kind of provide information on how you can get prepared for AWS certification. There's a tremendous amount of training and videos and presentations that are available to you. This is something that AWS has done a really good job of, is providing documentation and training on their products. But having said that, I personally found the content from Udemy. I'd argue that the Udemy courses were the reason that I was able to pass my certification exam. And I'm not, not sponsored by them. I'm not getting any kind of a perk. The thing I liked about the Udemy questions and the material is that it mirrors the actual certification tests pretty closely. So when I first started working towards certification, the sheer amount of training material that's available out there, it's kind of daunting. You don't really know where to start. So that was the first challenge that I had. There was another challenge that I had, which was kind of unexpected, and I'll show you what that is. Where is that? Actually, this will do. So here is the official study guide for the AWS Certified Solutions Architect. It costs about $33. You might consider purchasing it. Well, the problem that I had was that when I was looking to get certified, the study guide was actually years out of date. So this particular study guide came out about 9 months ago. But again, if you were studying a year ago, to become certified, the most up-to-date study guide from AWS itself, the book that AWS sells on certification, was far, far out of date. And this is just kind of a tip, I would say, a general tip for passing the AWS exams, which is that you really want to focus on knowing all of the latest and greatest AWS technologies. So if we look at the AWS architecture here, for instance, we have Amazon Aurora. Amazon Aurora didn't even exist when the last version of the AWS Solution Architect book was released. So there's absolutely no material on it in the book because it did not exist. So it's something to keep in mind when you are purchasing books or investing time in studying your AWS material, is make sure it's up to date, because AWS is changing all the time. At this point in the presentation, you're probably wondering, why should I get certified? It's definitely a daunting task. There's a lot of different paths to take. As I see it, there are two big advantages to certification. The first is that it helps you technically and professionally. Virtually every customer that I work with, they are all, I shouldn't say all of them, many of them are going into AWS or they're already there. So certification gives me the expertise to speak with my customers and know what the best solutions are, particularly as a solution architect. If you are personally in sales, it can help you determine what type of products could be appropriate for your customers. If you're a developer, it can show you how you can create solutions using Amazon Web Services. So I have a number of certifications. I'm personally ServiceNow certified. I'm Red Hat certified. I'm AWS certified. I used to be Solaris certified. I used to be a CISSP as well. But I personally find that the AWS certification has been the one that I use the most in my day-to-day work. So that's part of it, of course. But there's a bigger picture, which is that if you are an Amazon partner, certification helps your employer. So certification demonstrates to your employer's customers that you have the expertise to work with AWS and develop AWS solutions. AWS, they have a series of tiers. And so if you go to, here's a URL right here, using the partner scorecard to stay compliant with APN tier requirements. This gives you some information on the reasons to be AWS certified. So, for instance, we see here, this scorecard is for AWS itself somehow. And so they have a number of customer references. They have a number of certifications. There are also, to be AWS Partner, there's a requirement for a certain amount of revenue in AWS projects, typically partnered up with your customers. Another thing here that's important to note is that there are two tiers of certifications. There are the associate level and the professional level. As you can see, the professional certifications are much more difficult to acquire. It's much more rare to see somebody with an AWS professional certification. but the professional certifications are a way to, really demonstrate to your customers that your company has expertise that rises above the competition. As noted in the start of this video, the reason that I created this video was because I had coworkers who were coming to me and saying, hey, I'd like to get AWS certified. What's the process? And rather than have that conversation a number of times, I thought it would be valuable to create a video kind of laying down the path. I personally have been certified a number of times. I'm ServiceNow certified. I'm Red Hat certified. I'm AWS certified. I used to be Solaris certified, and I used to be CISSP. I've personally found that the AWS certification has been the most valuable. Basically, most of the customers that I work with either have infrastructure in AWS already, or they're looking to move into AWS. So I hope that this video has been valuable for you, whether you're somebody who just stumbled across it on the internet, or whether you're a coworker of mine. Now, speaking of coworkers, there's one additional angle here, which is that every AWS partnership is different. So there are some small shops with a handful of employees. There are some big shops out there with hundreds of employees. So the AWS partner requirements, those are going to vary from company to company. So you likely have questions about where your skill set fits into our company's goals with AWS. And obviously, those questions go beyond the scope of this video. So for that, please reach out to me personally. If I can't answer your questions, I can put you in contact with AWS itself, and then we can sort things out. I hope this video has been valuable for everybody watching it today. Thank you.